At this point in our story, the travels developed a hitch. I was supposed to go up to Wat Phra Pudabat, which is the temple of Buddha's footprint. There's supposed to be a footprint of Buddha there. It's in Thailand, but this particular part of Thailand was part of Cambodia at the time. Unfortunately, in order to get there, I was supposed to fly into Bangkok, and the Bangkok airport was closed by protesters. The legend dates back to the early 17th century when the king of the Thais sent a delegation to Sri Lanka. Ceylon was really the home of the Buddhism that's practiced in this part of the world. In Ceylon, the monks discovered, or they were told about a footprint that Buddha was supposed to have left in Thailand. And they started searching for it back in Thailand, and there was somebody by the name of Brahm Boon who wounded a deer. It disappeared into this hollow, and when it emerged, the deer was miraculously healed. Now the hunter pushed aside the bushes to discover a foot-shaped trench filled with water, and he happened to have a skin disease, and it immediately cured him of the skin disease. Thus the unescapable conclusion that this was, in fact, the footprint of Buddha that people were looking for. According to my guidebook, during the dry season, 1 million people a year visit as pilgrims to this particular temple. However, fortunately, you will not have to go to Thailand in order to see this temple. You can see it in the movie Rambo 3. At the beginning of Rambo 3, Rambo has finally found inner peace inside a monastery, and it happens to be this particular Buddhist monastery that we were looking for. Unfortunately for Rambo, however, Colonel Sam Troutman shows up to ask him for his help on a top-secret mission in Afghanistan, helping the Taliban against the Soviets.
John Rambo!
I don't believe this.
One can only hope now that in some future Rambo episode, Rambo goes to the Taliban and convinces them to change their current ways. Lopburi is one of those places where you can go two different directions. In this case, we're traveling north, but we're coming back to Lopburi in a few minutes. While Chinese populations have been pouring south through this area for 1,000 years, Ceylonese-style Buddhism has been pushing north. In the 14th century, there was a king who was looking to build a new monastery. So they took a fragment of one of the relics from Buddha from one of the other monasteries, and they put it into a religious object called a chedi. And they put that chedi on the back of a white elephant, and they let that elephant go where it wanted to until it found the place for the new monastery. The elephant climbed Mount Doi Sutep. Mount Doi Sutep is at the western edge of Chiang Mai, which is in the north of Thailand. And Mount Doi Sutep is one of the tallest mountains in Thailand. It stands 3,000 feet above Chiang Mai. Today you can drive most of the way up to the top of the mountain. But the last leg up to the temple is 300 steps. Elephants don't climb well, and this elephant was almost certainly close to exhaustion by the time that it got close to the top of the mountain. Certainly anybody else would be.
The elephant climbed up the mountain, and when it reached this spot, it circled around 3 times, trumpeted 3 times, sank to its knees, and it died. And that's why this temple is here.
I think I know how the elephant felt. Incidentally, this is a replica of the religious object that was on the back of the elephant. Today, it's surrounded with scaffolding, and that's partly because they're a little bit concerned about the stability of this area as a possibility of a mudslide. There is a pretty sheer drop towards Chiang Mai from this location. This is the most important shrine in all of northern Thailand. The shrine also has an impressive view of the city of Chiang Mai. The monastery is very pretty in its own right, and in addition, it is surrounded by a national park, and there is considerable wildlife up on this mountain. Incidentally, while I was on this trip, I ran into professional photographers and professional videographers making documentaries twice. The result of that must be that I was at the right place at the right time. Anyway, we have to get back to Lopburi now. I promised that there was another direction that I wanted to take. This one is not so much a religious direction as it is a political direction. Lopburi, where the temple to Buddha's footprint was located, was also at one time the capital. But it suffered a major smallpox epidemic in 1351, and the capital had to be moved. The capital was moved to a location along a river, and the city was called Ayutthaya. It grew as an amphibious city like Venice with canals, and by 1685 it had 1 million people, which was roughly double the size of London at the same time. In 1767, the Burmese attacked, and they captured the city and destroyed it, and it had to be moved again, just like the Thais had done to Angkor a few years earlier. Bangkok is just a little bit downriver from Ayutthaya. Initially, Bangkok was also an amphibious city. Founded in 1782 after the Burmese had sacked the old capital, initially only the temples and the royal palaces were actually built on dry land. Ordinary residences floated on a thick bamboo raft system out in the rivers and the canals. In fact, the king actually didn't call this city Bangkok. He gave it a 43-syllable name. Since then, 21 more syllables have been added. And so the Guinness Book of Records has certified this as the longest place name in the world, roughly translating as Great City of Angels, etc., etc., etc. Bangkok is actually the older name. It means Village of the Plum Olive. Where we're headed now, though, is the Royal Barge Museum. Up until 1967, the king always traveled on these royal barges, and did so at least once a year. The problem, of course, is that these boats are 100 years old, and they're becoming quite fragile, and so the last time there was really a full-scale royal procession was 1999, and that was to mark the king's 72nd birthday, and then again in 2006 to celebrate his 60th year on the throne. But when an outing does occur, it's memorable. 50 or more barges will fill the width of the river and stretch for almost a kilometer, drifting slowly to the beat of drums and the hypnotic strains of ancient boating hymns, chanted by 2,000 oarsmen dressed in luscious brocades. You've probably noticed that the level of the river is a little bit on the high side. In fact, it's much more impressive if you go up and down the street that runs along the river. Here the river is flowing through the store and into the street and the sewer system. when I got to Bangkok, the royal princess, the sister of the king, had just been cremated, and so the palace was closed to me. However, there is another location just to the south of the palace that was open, and I did visit that. This particular scene happens to be of the palace as seen from just outside the wall. Wat Pho is probably the most impressive temple that I did not intend to see. It covers 20 acres. The palace covers almost 100 acres, but you can't see most of the palace because it's closed off to the public. Wat Pho is the oldest temple in Bangkok. In fact, for that matter, it's older than the city of Bangkok itself. It was founded in the 17th century. In a sense, this is Bangkok's oldest university. It's basically a religious school, and part of this area is given over to everything from classrooms to basketball courts. There's a wide variety of curricula, from traditional medicine to literature to history to religious topics. But the reason why tourists come here is to see the reclining Buddha. He's about 150 feet long. The chapel isn't really any bigger than the Buddha, so you really can't get much of a picture of anything except for the 15-foot long smile of the Buddha.